Long before Hogwarts became a school defined by schedules, rules, and familiar rituals, it was already a place shaped by memory. Not memory in the orderly sense of dates recorded and facts preserved, but memory in a heavier, less settled form. The kind that lingers when emotion has nowhere else to go. Regret that never found resolution. Fear that was never fully confronted. Attachment that refused, even at the end, to loosen its grip. Hogwarts did not simply witness these emotions as the centuries passed. It absorbed them. Corridors that once echoed with hurried footsteps retained a sense of urgency long after the students were gone. Stairwells remembered hesitation, excitement, and dread. Even unused rooms seemed to hold a residual awareness of the lives that had once unfolded within them. It absorbed them. Stone that listened, corridors that remembered, rooms that seemed to hold on to what had once been felt within them. And in doing so, the castle became uniquely suited to one of the most misunderstood phenomena in the wizarding world: the persistence of ghosts. To understand why Hogwarts is home to so many ghosts, it is necessary to begin with what a ghost actually is. Not symbolically, and not sentimentally, but according to the practical understanding accepted within wizarding culture. A ghost is not a soul that has completed death. It is not an afterlife, and it is not a continuation of life in another form. A ghost is the result of a choice made at the moment of death, when a witch or wizard refuses to move on. That refusal is deliberate, even if it is born from panic rather than reason. The individual does not cross whatever threshold follows death. Instead, they leave behind an imprint of themselves, sustained by magic and anchored to the world they could not release. This distinction matters. In the wizarding world, death is understood as a transition rather than an abrupt disappearance. What lies beyond that transition is deliberately undefined. Magical theory acknowledges its existence but avoids certainty. What is clear is that most witches and wizards pass on. They do not remain. They do not linger in familiar places or drift through old rooms. Those who do become ghosts because they cannot bring themselves to take that final step. The reasons vary, but the underlying pattern is consistent. Fear of the unknown, attachment to people, places, or identities left unfinished. Regret over choices that cannot be undone. A deep reluctance to accept finality. When a witch or wizard dies while bound by these emotions, and when their magical presence is strong enough, an imprint of their identity remains behind. That imprint is what becomes a ghost. Ghosts retain memory and personality. They know who they were, and they remember their lives with clarity. They recognize old names, old habits, old grievances. They can converse, react, complain, reminisce, and observe. But they do not grow. They do not change in the way living people do. Whatever emotional state defined their death becomes, in many cases, the axis around which their ghostly existence turns. This is why ghosts are often described as diminished, not because they are cruel or broken, but because they are incomplete. They exist in constant proximity to life, without participation in it. They attend feasts but cannot taste the food. They float through corridors but cannot feel warmth or texture. They observe endlessly, unable to act in ways that meaningfully alter the world around them. Nearly headless, Nick explains this reality with disarming honesty when he admits that he chose to remain because he was afraid of what came next. He does not frame his choice as noble, or wise, or enviable. He presents it simply as fear. That fear is not treated as monstrous within wizarding culture, but it is treated as limiting. Ghosts remain not because they gain something, but because they could not let go. It is important to separate ghosts from other magical remnants that resemble them. Enchanted portraits, for example, are not ghosts in any meaningful sense. They are magical recordings created while the subject was alive, trained to mimic speech patterns, attitudes, and behaviours. They can offer advice and express emotion, but they do not possess continuity of consciousness. They cannot regret, they cannot fear death, because they never experienced it. Poltergeists occupy an entirely different category. They are not remnants of the dead at all. They are manifestations of collective emotional energy, shaped by chaos, immaturity, and unrest. Peeves exists not because he once lived and died, but because Hogwarts itself produced him. He is sustained by centuries of student mischief and rebellion. Where ghosts are defined by individual attachment, poltergeists are shaped by communal emotional overflow. Ghosts sit uneasily between these extremes. They are neither constructs nor manifestations. They are remnants of people who once lived and could not let go. Not every witch or wizard is capable of becoming a ghost. Magical understanding suggests that a strong magical presence is required, along with a powerful emotional refusal at the moment of death. Muggles do not leave behind ghosts in the wizarding sense. While they may be remembered or commemorated, they do not imprint themselves onto the physical world through magic. This reinforces the idea that ghosts are a uniquely magical consequence of identity and choice. Ghosts also differ sharply from darker attempts to resist death, such as Horcruxes. Horcrux creation requires deliberate violence and the fragmentation of the soul. It is an act of domination over mortality. A ghost, by contrast, is not created through harm to others, but through refusal of the natural process of death. Both result in unnatural states of being, but their moral foundations are fundamentally different. One seeks control, the other seeks avoidance. Within wizarding society, ghosts are treated with a mixture of politeness and unease. They are acknowledged as people who once lived, but they are also reminders of endings that never fully occurred. They are not hidden away, nor are they celebrated. This ambiguity shapes how ghosts are integrated into daily life, particularly at Hogwarts. Students encounter ghosts almost immediately upon arrival at the castle. For many, this first exposure happens before lessons even begin, shaping their understanding of Hogwarts as a place where the boundary between life and death is acknowledged rather than concealed. They drift through corridors, pass through walls, and gather openly in communal spaces. This early exposure normalizes them. Death in this context is not dramatic or sensational. It is familiar, constant, and quietly unsettling. But understanding what ghosts are is only the beginning. To understand why Hogwarts sustains so many of them, it is necessary to turn attention to the environment itself and to the conditions that allow these imprints to persist. Hogwarts is not merely old, it is ancient, continuously occupied, and saturated with magic. It is a place where emotion, identity, and power have intersected for more than 1,000 years, leaving behind traces that never fully fade. Hogwarts did not become a sanctuary for ghosts by accident. The castle's long association with the dead is the result of specific conditions that, taken together, make it one of the most conducive environments for hauntings in the wizarding world. These conditions are not purely architectural, nor are they solely historical. They emerge from the intersection of age, continuous magical occupation, emotional intensity, and an institutional culture that neither suppresses nor sensationalizes the presence of the dead. First, there is the matter of uninterrupted habitation. Hogwarts has been continuously occupied by witches and wizards for more than a millennium. Unlike abandoned castles, ruins, or intermittently used strongholds, Hogwarts has never gone dormant. Each year new students arrive, bringing with them the volatility of youth and the intensity of first discovery. Each year, staff live and work within the same walls, forming long-term attachments to place. This continuity matters. Ghosts form where memory accumulates rather than dissipates, and Hogwarts has never been given the chance to forget. The age of the castle compounds this effect. Over centuries, layers of spellwork have been added, reinforced, and adapted. Defensive enchantments, educational charms, concealment magic, and countless minor spells have been woven into the structure itself. Hogwarts is not merely enchanted, it is saturated. Magic flows through the building in ways that are both deliberate and incidental. When witches and wizards cast spells daily within the same spaces for generations, the environment becomes receptive, capable of holding impressions long after their originators are gone. This magical saturation is intensified by the purpose of the place. Hogwarts is not a residence, a marketplace, or a government building. It is a school. It is where young witches and wizards first learn to name and control their power. For many students, it is the first place where their abilities are acknowledged rather than hidden. That transition carries enormous emotional weight. Fear, relief, excitement, resentment, ambition, and longing all surface during these years, amplified by adolescence and by the discovery of magic itself. Emotion in the wizarding world is not separate from magic. Strong feeling influences spellcasting, control, and outcome. Moments of intense emotion leave traces, especially when paired with powerful magic. Hogwarts has hosted countless such moments, friendships formed and broken, rivalries ignited, failures endured, triumphs celebrated. These experiences do not vanish when the people involved leave. They settle into the environment, becoming part of the atmosphere future generations inherit. The castle's responsive nature further deepens this effect. Hogwarts does not remain static. Staircases move, rooms shift, hidden passages appear and disappear. These features are not cosmetic. They suggest that the castle itself reacts to need, intent, and presence. A structure capable of responding to the living is also capable of retaining what the living leave behind. When death occurs within such a responsive environment, the boundary between presence and absence becomes thinner. Death, notably, has never been entirely absent from Hogwarts. Although remembered as a place of relative safety, the castle's history includes accidents, neglect, and periods of open violence. Students have died on the grounds. Staff members have lived and died within its walls. During times of wider magical conflict, Hogwarts has not been immune to the consequences of war. Each death occurred within a space already heavy with meaning, and in some cases, within moments of profound fear or regret. The institutional culture of Hogwarts also plays a critical role. Unlike many magical spaces, the school does not attempt to erase or conceal its past. Tradition is preserved deliberately. The house system ties identity to the institution across generations. Founders are spoken of as present influences rather than distant figures. Alumni are remembered, their stories repeated until they become part of the school's collective understanding of itself. This emphasis on continuity creates emotional anchors. For some witches and wizards, Hogwarts becomes the place where they were most fully themselves. When such individuals die, particularly if their lives were defined by their time at the school. The pull to remain can outweigh the pull to move on. The castle becomes not just a location, but a defining element of identity. This is why so many Hogwarts ghosts remain associated with specific houses or areas. Nearly headless Nick continues to identify himself with Gryffindor, seeking the recognition and belonging that mattered to him in life. The Grey Lady lingers near Ravenclaw Tower, bound by secrecy and regret, tied directly to her family and her house. The Fat Friar drifts among Hufflepuffs, reflecting a life shaped by warmth, patience, and inclusion. The Bloody Baron haunts the dungeons of Slytherin, his presence heavy with violence and unresolved guilt. Even Moaning Myrtle's haunting reflects this pattern. Her life at Hogwarts was defined by isolation, humiliation, and neglect, and her death occurred in a moment of acute vulnerability. Her continued presence in the bathrooms is not arbitrary. It reflects the emotional geography of her experience. She remains where her suffering was most concentrated and where her life ended abruptly. Hogwarts also differs from other magical institutions in its tolerance for ghosts. In much of the wizarding world, ghosts are treated as inconvenient reminders of mortality or as disturbances to be managed. At Hogwarts, they are accommodated. They attend feasts. They participate in ceremonies. They are acknowledged openly rather than hidden away. This acceptance reduces pressure for ghosts to withdraw or fade, reinforcing their continued presence. There is an educational dimension to this tolerance. By allowing students to coexist with ghosts, Hogwarts introduces the reality of death without dramatization. Ghosts are not framed as monsters or omens. They are familiar figures, flawed and limited, whose existence quietly underscores consequence and the cost of unresolved fear. This exposure aligns with the school's broader philosophy of confronting difficult realities through knowledge rather than avoidance. Finally, there is the sheer density of magical youth to consider. Hundreds of students experiencing intense emotion within a magically responsive environment create an atmosphere thick with feeling. Over centuries, that atmosphere becomes part of the castle itself. Hogwarts is not only haunted by individuals, it is steeped in accumulated emotion, memory layered upon memory, creating conditions where the past does not easily release its hold. Taken together, these factors explain why Hogwarts sustains so many ghosts. It is ancient, continuously occupied, emotionally intense, magically saturated, historically dangerous at times, culturally reflective, and institutionally accepting. Ghosts do not linger there by chance. They remain because Hogwarts gives them a place to stay, a structure capable of holding what they could not bring themselves to let go of. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington is remembered at Hogwarts less as a historical figure and more as a presence. His familiarity is such that students often forget they are interacting with someone who lived and died centuries before their own time. He drifts through corridors with practiced familiarity, interrupts conversations politely, and attends feasts with a hopeful attentiveness that has long since lost any practical purpose. To most students, he is simply nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost whose pale, rough and faintly wobbling head make him both approachable and faintly tragic. Yet behind that softened familiarity lies a life and death shaped by ambition, failure, and a desire for recognition that followed him beyond the grave. In life, Sir Nicholas was very much a man of his time. He lived during the late medieval period, an era in which social standing, courtly favour, and public reputation mattered deeply. Born into a minor noble family, Nicholas pursued a life at court rather than one of inherited land or quiet obscurity. He was educated, articulate, and acutely aware of the power of appearances. Magic for him was not merely a practical skill, but a means of advancement. His ambition was not conquest or wealth, but recognition, to be seen as refined, impressive, and worthy of status among his peers. Nicholas's magical talents eventually secured him a position at a royal court, where he served as a wizard in residence. His duties likely included charms of comfort, minor enchantments, and demonstrations intended to impress visiting dignitaries. Such positions were precarious. Court wizards were expected to entertain and reassure, to reinforce the mystique of power without unsettling it. A wizard who frightened or embarrassed the court risked swift consequences. It was within this environment that Nicholas met the failure that would define his death. According to canonical accounts, he attempted a cosmetic charm intended to straighten a noblewoman's teeth. Whether through miscalculation, overconfidence, or the inherent instability of early magical techniques, the spell went catastrophically wrong. The woman's teeth grew to an alarming size, protruding far beyond what could be concealed or easily corrected. In another context, such an error might have been forgiven. At court, it was not. The incident embarrassed those in power and undermined the image Nicholas was meant to support. He was arrested and sentenced to death, condemned not for malice, but for incompetence. The execution was carried out by beheading, a method intended to be swift and decisive. It was neither. The executioner's axe was blunt, and the task required repeated blows. Nicholas did not die cleanly. He suffered through multiple strikes before death finally came. This brutal end, marked by pain, humiliation, and a profound sense of injustice, left a deep emotional imprint. It is difficult to imagine a death more likely to produce the fear and attachment necessary for ghosthood. When Nicholas died, he did not move on. Whether out of fear, indignation, or an inability to accept such an undignified end, he remained. The ghost that formed retained not only his personality, but the physical marker of his death. His head is not fully severed, but hangs loosely, attached by a strip of translucent flesh. This partial decapitation became both his defining feature and his enduring frustration. As a ghost, Nicholas carried his preoccupation with status and recognition into the afterlife. He adopted the moniker Nearly Headless Nick, a title that acknowledged his condition while attempting to soften its indignity. He continued to dress in the clothing of his era, complete with ruff and doublet, maintaining the appearance of a gentleman long after the social structures that defined such status had faded. His association with Gryffindor House reflects both temperament and aspiration. Nicholas admired bravery, chivalry, and honour, values that aligned closely with his own self-image. As Gryffindor's resident ghost, he sought not authority, but belonging. He attended common room gatherings, offered encouragement, and took visible pride in the house's achievements. Yet beneath this loyalty lay a persistent insecurity. Nicholas was painfully aware of his incomplete execution and the social stigma it carried even among ghosts. This insecurity is most clearly illustrated through his repeated attempts to join the Headless Hunt, an exclusive group of fully decapitated ghosts who prided themselves on the dramatic perfection of their deaths. Membership required complete separation of head from body, something Nicholas could not claim. the headless hunt rejected him repeatedly, citing his lack of qualification. These rejections cut deeply. For a man whose life and death were shaped by the desire for recognition, exclusion in death was a cruel continuation of the same pattern. His fixation on the hunt was not merely vanity, it was a longing to belong to a community that acknowledged him without qualification. This longing helps explain Nicholas's demeanour at Hogwarts. His politeness, his eagerness to be included, and his sensitivity to slights all reflect a ghost still seeking validation. He is courteous to students and staff alike, often going out of his way to assist or reassure. Yet moments of disappointment, such as being overlooked or dismissed, affect him more deeply than one might expect of a being long removed from life. Nicholas's relationship with the living is therefore complex. He enjoys interaction, conversation, and recognition, but he is constantly reminded of his limitations. He cannot eat at feasts, though he attends them faithfully. He cannot participate fully in celebrations, though he longs to. His presence is welcomed, but rarely essential. Despite this, Nicholas remains one of the more emotionally accessible ghosts at Hogwarts. He expresses sympathy openly, as seen when he consoles students in moments of grief or confusion. His response to tragedy is marked by genuine feeling rather than detachment. This emotional availability may stem from the fact that his own death was unresolved, leaving him perpetually close to the feelings of the living. Nicholas's reaction to the death of others, particularly students, reveals a quiet awareness of the cost of ghosthood. When confronted with the possibility that someone might choose to remain behind, as he did, he offers no encouragement. He speaks of his own choice with restraint, acknowledging fear rather than glorifying his existence. This suggests a level of self-awareness that tempers his longing for recognition with an understanding of its price. As centuries passed, Hogwarts changed, but Nicholas did not. He watched generations of students arrive, grow, and leave. He observed shifts in magical practice, social norms, and institutional priorities. Through it all, his own concerns remained remarkably consistent. Belonging, dignity, and acknowledgement continue to matter to him as much in death as they had in life. This constancy is not portrayed as pathetic, but as human. Nicholas is not trapped because he's shallow or foolish. He is trapped because he was deeply invested in how he was seen, and death denied him the resolution he needed to let go of that concern. His ghostly existence is therefore not merely a curiosity, but a continuation of a life left unfinished. At Hogwarts, nearly headless Nick serves an unintended educational role. His presence quietly demonstrates that bravery and ambition, when bound too tightly to reputation, can become sources of regret. His courteous manner and lingering insecurity offer students a glimpse of what it means to remain emotionally anchored to a past that cannot be changed. In this way, Nicholas embodies one of the central truths of ghosthood. Ghosts do not remain because they have more to accomplish. They remain because they cannot accept what has already happened. For Sir Nicholas de Mimsy-Porpington, death did not resolve his longing for recognition. It preserved it. And so he continues to drift through the halls of Hogwarts, polite, hopeful, and forever nearly complete. Helena Ravenclaw is remembered at Hogwarts less through familiarity than through absence. Her silence is so consistent that it becomes a defining feature, shaping how others perceive her, even when she's not actively present. She is known as the Grey Lady, a quiet figure who drifts through Ravenclaw Tower and its surrounding corridors with a reserve that discourages casual conversation. Unlike Nearly Headless Nick, she does not seek interaction, nor does she linger where attention might follow. Her presence is subtle, easily overlooked by those who do not already know her story. Yet the weight she carries is among the heaviest borne by any ghost at Hogwarts, shaped by secrecy, pride, and a legacy she could never escape. In life, Helena was the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, and among the most brilliant witches of her era. From the moment of her birth, Helena lived in the shadow of extraordinary intellect. Rowena Ravenclaw was celebrated not only for her magical skill, but for her philosophy of learning itself. She valued curiosity, reason, and the disciplined pursuit of understanding. These values shaped Ravenclaw House, but they also shaped Helena's childhood in ways that were both formative and restrictive. To be the child of such a figure was to exist under constant comparison. Helena was intelligent by any reasonable standard, but she grew up surrounded by the reputation of a mind considered exceptional even among witches and wizards. Over time, admiration curdled into resentment. Helena desired recognition, not merely as Rowena's daughter, but as an individual whose worth could stand independently. That desire, untempered by patience or humility, became the fault line upon which her life eventually fractured. Central to this fracture was Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, an enchanted artifact said to enhance the wisdom of its wearer. Whether Helena fully understood the nature of the diadem's magic, or merely believed the legend attached to it, the object came to represent everything she felt denied. It was knowledge made tangible, wisdom embodied in form. To possess it was, symbolically, to claim authority over the very quality for which her mother was revered. Helena stole the diadem and fled Hogwarts. This act was not merely theft, but rejection. She removed herself physically from the institution her mother had founded, and emotionally from the legacy she felt imprisoned by. Her flight took her far from Britain, eventually leading her to forests in what is now Albania. There she attempted to build an identity free from comparison, carrying the diadem with her as both proof and burden. Rowena Ravenclaw's response to this betrayal reveals the complexity of their relationship. Rather than pursuing punishment, Rowena fell gravely ill with grief and regret. Realizing that time was slipping away, she sent a man she trusted to retrieve Helena and the diadem. This man was a Baron of Slytherin House, already marked by intensity, possessiveness, and a capacity for violence that would later define his ghostly existence. The Baron found Helena in Albania. What followed was not reconciliation, but tragedy. According to established accounts, Helena rejected his pleas to return, refusing to surrender either the diadem or her autonomy. In response, the Baron murdered her. Whether the act was driven by rage, rejection, or a warped sense of loyalty, it was irreversible. Realizing the magnitude of what he had done, the Baron took his own life soon after. Helena died far from home, killed by a man sent to save her, burdened by regret that came too late to be expressed. The emotional conditions of her death were stark: isolation, betrayal, guilt. These conditions made her particularly susceptible to ghosthood. She did not move on. She remained, returning eventually to Hogwarts, the place she had fled and the legacy she could not outrun. As a ghost, Helena became the Grey Lady. The title itself suggests anonymity, a deliberate fading of identity. Unlike other ghosts who retain titles or names, Helena distanced herself from personal recognition. Her demeanour is restrained, her speech measured, her interactions minimal. She does not recount her story freely, nor does she volunteer information about her past. Silence becomes her chosen form of penance. Her association with Ravenclaw House is both natural and fraught. She is bound to the tower not simply by loyalty, but by unresolved tension. Ravenclaw House celebrates intelligence, curiosity, and wit. Yet Helena's own pursuit of recognition through knowledge led to theft, flight, and death. Her presence within the house is therefore a quiet contradiction. She embodies both the aspiration for wisdom and the cost of seeking it without balance. This internal conflict defines Helena's ghostly existence. She does not seek absolution from others, nor does she actively punish herself through overt misery. Instead, she withdraws. Her restraint is not coldness, but containment. By limiting her interactions, she limits the risk of causing further harm through her knowledge or her story. Helena's role in later events at Hogwarts reveals the depth of her guilt. When questioned about the diadem centuries after her death, she initially resists sharing information, even when the stakes are high. Her reluctance is not motivated by malice, but by fear of repeating the consequences of her earlier actions. Knowledge, in her experience, has always carried danger. When she does finally reveal the truth about the diadem's fate, it is done with visible reluctance and emotional weight. She speaks not as a guardian of secrets, but as someone forced to confront the damage caused by her silence. This moment does not redeem her past, but it demonstrates growth within the limited scope available to a ghost. While ghosts do not fundamentally change, they can choose how they engage with the present. Helena's relationship to her mother remains one of the most poignant aspects of her story. Rowena Ravenclaw died without reconciling with her daughter, unaware of the full circumstances of her death. Helena, in turn, carries the knowledge that her actions contributed to her mother's suffering. This unresolved bond anchors her to Hogwarts as firmly as any physical location. The tower is not merely a residence, it is a reminder. In contrast to nearly headless Nick's longing for recognition, Helena's defining trait is restraint. Where he seeks inclusion, she seeks distance. Where he is outwardly expressive, she is inwardly burdened. Both responses emerge from regret, but they manifest in opposite ways. For students, the Grey Lady often appears distant, even unapproachable. Yet her presence serves a subtle instructional purpose. She stands as a reminder that intelligence, when pursued in isolation from empathy and humility, can fracture relationships rather than strengthen them. Her silence underscores the idea that wisdom includes knowing when not to act, when not to speak, and when ambition must yield to responsibility. Over centuries, Helena has watched Ravenclaw House celebrate brilliance in all its forms. She has observed students succeed, fail, collaborate, and compete. Through it all, her own story remains largely unspoken, a quiet undercurrent beneath the house's reputation. This silence is not erasure, it is choice. Helena Ravenclaw remains at Hogwarts not because she seeks recognition, but because she cannot release the weight of what she took and what she lost. Her ghost is not a warning delivered loudly, but a lesson delivered slowly. Wisdom, once misused, leaves traces that cannot be undone. And so the Grey Lady continues to drift through Ravenclaw Tower, watchful, reserved, and forever bound to a legacy she once tried to steal. The Fat Friar is often remembered as the most approachable of Hogwarts ghosts. His laughter carries easily through stone corridors, softening spaces that might otherwise feel austere or unwelcoming. He laughs easily, greets students warmly, and moves through the castle with a genial presence that contrasts sharply with the austerity or severity of other spectral figures. To many, he appears uncomplicated, even cheerful, a comforting constant rather than a figure of tragedy. Yet this surface warmth conceals a life and death shaped by tension, misunderstanding, and a quiet form of martyrdom that reflects the deeper values of Hufflepuff House. In life, the Fat Friar was a member of a religious order during a period when magic and organised religion existed in an uneasy relationship. Medieval magical Britain was not governed by clear distinctions between the sacred and the arcane. Folk magic, superstition, and early wizardry often overlapped with religious belief, creating environments where miracles and heresies were difficult to distinguish. For a friar to possess magical ability placed him in a precarious position, admired by some as divinely gifted and feared by others as dangerously unorthodox. Unlike many witches and wizards of his era, the Fat Friar did not attempt to conceal his magic entirely. He used it openly to heal the sick, ease suffering, and assist communities that lacked both medical knowledge and resources. His approach to magic was practical and compassionate rather than ambitious. Spells were tools for service, not displays of power. This orientation aligned closely with what would later define Hufflepuff House: patience, fairness, diligence, and an emphasis on collective well-being. However, this same openness eventually led to his downfall. In a society increasingly suspicious of unexplained phenomena, the friar's abilities attracted scrutiny from religious authorities. His miracles, once tolerated or even celebrated, began to be interpreted as evidence of dangerous influence. Rumours spread, motives were questioned, acts of healing were reframed as acts of interference. The line between sanctioned religious practice and forbidden magic narrowed until it disappeared entirely. The Fat Friar was ultimately arrested and executed, condemned not for cruelty or malice, but for refusing to deny the very abilities that defined his vocation. Canonical accounts suggest that his execution was carried out by fellow churchmen, a betrayal that added emotional weight to his death. He died at the hands of those whose values he believed he shared, accused of wrongdoing for acts rooted in compassion. This combination of injustice and restraint is central to understanding why he became a ghost. Unlike other Hogwarts ghosts whose deaths were marked by rage or fear, the Fat Friar's death was marked by resignation. He did not flee, fight, or curse those who condemned him. He accepted his fate quietly, trusting that his intentions would matter more than the accusations against him. Yet acceptance does not negate attachment. His sense of belonging, once tied to his religious community, shifted toward the magical one that had given his abilities meaning. As a ghost, the Fat Friar retained his warmth, humour, and patience. He did not become embittered by betrayal, nor did he withdraw into silence. Instead, he continued to embody the virtues he practiced in life. He comforts students, offers encouragement, and diffuses tension with gentle humour. His laughter, often noted as booming and infectious, serves as a counterpoint to the more sombre presence of other ghosts. His association with Hufflepuff House is therefore deeply symbolic. Hufflepuff was founded on the belief that dedication and fairness mattered as much as brilliance or ambition. Helga Hufflepuff valued inclusion, recognising that not all contributions are dramatic or celebrated. The Fat Friar's life reflects this philosophy. He did not seek recognition or power, he sought usefulness. Within Hufflepuff common spaces, his presence reinforces a sense of quiet continuity. He drifts among students as a familiar figure, one who does not judge or demand. For new students, particularly those uncertain of their place within Hogwarts' social hierarchy, his kindness offers reassurance. He does not represent unattainable ideals. He represents steadiness. Yet beneath this warmth lies an unresolved tension. The Fat Friar's continued presence suggests that acceptance alone was not enough to allow him to move on. His execution, though met with composure, was still unjust. The dissonance between his intentions and his treatment left a moral imbalance that death did not resolve. Remaining as a ghost allowed him to stay connected to a community that understood magic not as heresy, but as capacity. Unlike Nearly Headless Nick or Helena Ravenclaw, the Fat Friar does not appear to dwell on regret. His ghosthood is not characterized by visible sorrow or obsession. Instead, it reflects quiet endurance. He continues to serve, albeit in limited ways, offering comfort rather than cures, presence rather than action. This endurance aligns with Hufflepuff's emphasis on perseverance through difficulty. His relationship with the living highlights the limitations of ghostly existence. He cannot heal wounds or alleviate suffering in the ways he once did. He must watch students struggle without the ability to intervene directly. Yet he remains present, listening, encouraging, and bearing witness. In this way, his ghosthood becomes a continuation of service shaped by constraint rather than power. The Fat Friar's demeanour also complicates simplistic interpretations of ghosthood as punishment or failure. His existence is not portrayed as miserable. He laughs, jokes, and engages. Yet this apparent contentment should not be mistaken for fulfillment. He remains because he has not fully relinquished his role as caretaker. His attachment is not to place or status, but to purpose. For students observing him, this offers a subtle lesson. Compassion, when bound to identity, can become a source of attachment as powerful as ambition or pride. The desire to help, to remain useful, to be present for others can anchor an individual as firmly as fear or regret. The Fat Friar demonstrates that even virtues, when left unresolved, can tether a witch or wizard to the world. Over centuries, he has watched Hufflepuff House evolve, welcoming students of all backgrounds and abilities. He has seen diligence rewarded and overlooked, kindness tested and affirmed. Through it all, he has remained a constant presence, embodying the house's values without demanding recognition for them. The Fat Friar's story reminds us that ghosts do not always remain because of dramatic trauma or overwhelming fear. Sometimes they remain because they cannot imagine abandoning the work that once gave their lives meaning. His ghost is not a warning delivered loudly, but a quiet illustration of devotion carried too far. At Hogwarts, the Fat Friar stands as a testament to the enduring power of patience, fairness, and care. His presence softens the castle's haunted reputation, offering warmth where others offer weight. Yet beneath that warmth lies a life interrupted and a purpose left unfinished. And so he continues to drift through the halls, laughing gently, serving where he can, and embodying the values of Hufflepuff long after his hands can no longer heal. Among the ghosts of Hogwarts, none carries a presence as heavy or as deliberately restrained as the Bloody Baron. Even when he is not seen, his proximity is often felt, announced by the faint sound of chains or a sudden chill in the air. Where others drift, converse, or linger with varying degrees of familiarity, the Baron looms. His chains clank softly as he moves, stained with spectral blood that never fades. Students rarely approach him willingly, and even other ghosts give him space. He is not feared because he threatens violence, but because he embodies it. His story is one of power, obsession, guilt, and a punishment that he continues to impose upon himself long after death. In life, the Bloody Baron was a wizard of considerable authority and influence. Though the precise details of his early life remain obscure, canon establishes that he was associated with Slytherin House and likely lived during the same general period as the founders. His demeanour suggests a man accustomed to command, one whose sense of identity was tied to control and hierarchy. Unlike the Fat Friar, whose magic served others quietly, the Baron's magic appears to have been bound up with dominance and expectation. His defining relationship was with Helena Ravenclaw. He was tasked by Rowena Ravenclaw with retrieving her daughter and the stolen diadem, a responsibility that carried both trust and pressure. The assignment itself placed the Baron in a position of authority over Helena's fate, a dynamic that would have reinforced his existing tendencies toward control. Whether he believed he was acting out of loyalty, possessiveness, or wounded pride, his actions reveal a failure to recognize Helena's autonomy. When the Baron found Helena in Albania, he did not persuade her to return. Accounts agree that she refused him. What followed was an act of irreversible violence. The Baron murdered Helena in a moment shaped by rage, rejection, or the inability to accept defiance. This act was not sanctioned, nor was it justifiable by any standard. It was the culmination of a mindset that equated authority with entitlement. The realization of what he had done came too late. Overcome with remorse, the Baron took his own life shortly afterward. This sequence of murder followed by suicide is central to understanding his ghosthood. His death was not merely tragic, it was morally catastrophic. Unlike other ghosts whose attachment is rooted in fear or regret alone, the Baron's attachment is bound to guilt. As a ghost, the Bloody Baron does not attempt to soften his image. He appears as he died, blood-stained and burdened by chains that he inflicted upon himself as a form of penance. These chains are not imposed by any external authority. They are self-chosen, a deliberate reminder of his crimes. In death, he subjects himself to a visible symbol of punishment, enforcing the judgment he believes he deserves. This self-imposed suffering distinguishes him from other Hogwarts ghosts. Where nearly headless Nick seeks recognition and the Fat Friar offers comfort, the Baron seeks restraint. He does not indulge conversation. He does not seek companionship. His silence is intentional. By limiting his interactions, he limits the harm he might cause. His presence is a warning he never articulates aloud. The Baron's association with Slytherin House is complex. Slytherin values ambition, resourcefulness, and determination, traits that in life likely reinforced his authority. Yet his ghostly existence represents the destructive potential of these traits when severed from empathy and accountability. He does not celebrate the house's successes, nor does he mentor its students. His presence is observational rather than participatory. Despite his fearsome reputation, the Bloody Baron is not chaotic. In fact, he is one of the few figures capable of exerting control over Peeves, the castle's poltergeist. This authority suggests that the Baron's power, even in death, is recognised within Hogwarts' supernatural hierarchy. Peeves responds to him not out of affection, but out of respect or fear. This dynamic reinforces the idea that the Baron retains a capacity for command, even as he refuses to wield it broadly. The contrast between the Baron and the Grey Lady is particularly instructive. Both are bound by the same tragedy, yet they respond to it differently. Helena withdraws into silence and secrecy, seeking to minimize harm through restraint. The Baron embraces visible punishment, wearing his guilt openly. One internalizes remorse, the other externalizes it. Together, they represent two divergent responses to irreversible wrongdoing. The Bloody Baron's continued presence at Hogwarts raises difficult questions about justice and redemption. His ghosthood is not framed as atonement. Remaining behind does not undo his crime, nor does it bring peace to his victim. His chains do not absolve him. Instead, his existence illustrates the limits of punishment when repentance comes too late. For students, the Baron is often encountered only in passing, a chilling figure glimpsed in dim corridors. Few learn his full story, and fewer still are encouraged to. Yet his presence exerts a quiet influence. He stands as a reminder that power without restraint can become destructive, and that remorse does not erase harm. Unlike other ghosts, the Baron does not appear to derive comfort from the routines of Hogwarts. He does not attend feasts or celebrations. He does not linger in communal spaces. His movements are deliberate and solitary. This isolation is not imposed, it is chosen. He remains apart because closeness, for him, carries too much risk. Over centuries, the Bloody Baron has watched Hogwarts evolve. He has observed changes in governance, pedagogy, and student culture, yet his own condition remains static. His punishment does not lessen with time, nor does his guilt fade. Ghosthood, for him, is not stasis born of fear, but stasis enforced by conscience. In this way, the Bloody Baron embodies one of the darkest truths of ghosthood. Some remain because they cannot accept what happened to them. Others remain because they cannot forgive themselves for what they did. His presence is not a story of longing, but of accountability pursued beyond death. At Hogwarts, the Bloody Baron does not offer comfort, guidance, or companionship. He offers consequence. His chains clink softly as he passes, an audible reminder that choices made in life can echo indefinitely. He is not there to teach, yet his existence instructs all the same. Power once abused leaves marks that time alone cannot erase. And so he continues to haunt the castle, silent, burdened, and bound to a punishment he believes he must never escape. Myrtle Elizabeth Warren is the youngest of Hogwarts' permanent ghosts, and in many ways the most emotionally exposed. Her reactions remain immediate and unfiltered, as though time never granted her the distance it afforded the older ghosts. Known to generations of students as Moaning Myrtle, she haunts the bathrooms near the second floor, announcing her presence with loud sobs, sharp complaints, and an unmistakable sense of grievance. To many she appears childish, intrusive, and exhausting. Yet beneath the theatrics lies one of the most painful stories connected to the castle, shaped not by ambition or power, but by neglect, isolation, and cruelty left unaddressed. In life, Myrtle was a Muggle-born witch who arrived at Hogwarts during a period when prejudice against non-pureblood students was widespread and openly expressed. She was shy, sensitive, and deeply insecure, traits that made her an easy target in an environment that prized confidence and talent. Unlike students who found early validation through friendship or house pride, Myrtle struggled to belong. Her accent, her mannerisms, and her eagerness to please marked her as different, and those differences were seized upon by her peers. Myrtle's years at Hogwarts were defined by bullying. She was mocked for her appearance, teased relentlessly, and made to feel unwelcome in shared spaces. These experiences were not isolated incidents, but sustained patterns of behaviour that eroded her sense of safety. Importantly, the adults responsible for her care failed to intervene in any meaningful way. The neglect Myrtle experienced was not only social, but institutional. She was left to navigate hostility alone. The emotional toll of this isolation shaped Myrtle's response to conflict. When distressed, she retreated rather than confronted. Bathrooms became places of refuge, spaces where she could cry without being observed or ridiculed. It was in one such moment, hiding and weeping, that Myrtle encountered the event that ended her life. Myrtle died when she was killed by the basilisk, released into the school through the Chamber of Secrets. Unaware of the danger she faced, she heard a boy speaking near the sinks and opened a stall door to tell him to leave. She caught the basilisk's gaze and died instantly. The speed of her death stands in stark contrast to the years of suffering that preceded it. Her life ended not in a moment of agency or recognition, but in an accident born of secrecy and neglect. The emotional conditions of Myrtle's death were particularly conducive to ghosthood. She died frightened, alone, and already burdened by unresolved pain. Unlike ghosts whose attachment is rooted in fear of the unknown or guilt over past actions, Myrtle's attachment was rooted in injustice. She had not been protected, she had not been seen. Death arrived before any possibility of redress. Myrtle did not move on. She remained, returning to the place where she had felt most vulnerable and where her life ended. Her ghost initially haunted the student who had caused her death, following her relentlessly in an attempt to force acknowledgement. This behaviour, disruptive and obsessive, reflected a desperate need to be recognised. When her haunting was deemed intolerable, Myrtle was compelled to confine herself largely to the bathrooms, further reinforcing her isolation. As a ghost, Myrtle's personality appears exaggerated, but it is not fundamentally altered. Her loud crying, sudden mood shifts, and intrusive behaviour are extensions of emotions that were never given space to settle. She expresses grief openly because she never learned to contain it safely. Her ghosthood amplifies vulnerability rather than tempering it. Myrtle's interactions with the living are marked by volatility. She oscillates between seeking companionship and lashing out when she feels ignored or dismissed. These patterns mirror the dynamics of her life, where attempts at connection were often met with ridicule. As a ghost, she repeats these patterns, unable to escape them. Despite this, Myrtle demonstrates moments of clarity and courage. She assists Harry Potter during critical moments, providing information that proves essential. These moments reveal a capacity for insight and loyalty that were rarely acknowledged in her life. Yet even these contributions are framed through her longing for validation, underscoring how deeply unmet that need remains. Myrtle's relationship with the bathroom she haunts is significant. It is not merely a convenient location. It is the place where she cried alone, where she died, and where she continues to express emotion without restraint. The bathroom becomes a symbolic space of unacknowledged pain, tucked away from the main corridors of the school. Her presence also highlights the limitations of Hogwarts' otherwise accommodating approach to ghosts. While the castle accepts spectral inhabitants broadly, Myrtle's emotional intensity is managed rather than understood. She is tolerated, relocated, and occasionally mocked, but rarely engaged with compassion. This reflects an uncomfortable truth. Not all suffering is easy to coexist with. For students, moaning Myrtle often serves as comic relief. Her exaggerated complaints and melodrama invite laughter. Yet this framing risks obscuring the reality of her story. Myrtle is not humorous by design. She is the product of sustained neglect and unaddressed cruelty. Her behaviour is what happens when vulnerability is left unsupported. In contrast to older ghosts who are anchored by regret or guilt, Myrtle is anchored by unmet need. She remains because she was denied safety, kindness, and recognition in life. Ghosthood allows her to demand attention in a way she never could before, even if that attention is often negative. Myrtle's continued presence at Hogwarts serves as a quiet indictment of the institution's failures. Her death occurred on school grounds. Her suffering was visible and ignored. The systems meant to protect her did not act in time. While Hogwarts learns and adapts over centuries, Myrtle remains as evidence of what happens when care is withheld. Her story complicates the romantic notion of Hogwarts as a wholly safe and nurturing environment. It reminds students and listeners alike that even magical institutions can fail those who need protection most. The presence of a ghost like Myrtle ensures that this failure is not easily forgotten. Over time, Myrtle has watched generations of students pass through the bathroom she haunts. She observes friendships form, conflicts resolve, and young witches and wizards grow into confidence. These scenes unfold around her without her participation, reinforcing her separation from the life she lost. Myrtle Elizabeth Warren remains at Hogwarts not because she seeks power or control, but because she was never given closure. Her ghosthood is loud, uncomfortable, and persistent precisely because her pain was never addressed in life. She is a reminder that neglect can echo as loudly as violence, and that some wounds, when ignored, refuse to fade quietly. And so moaning Myrtle continues to haunt the castle, her sobs drifting through tiled corridors, carrying with them a story of loneliness, loss, and a child who was never truly protected. Beyond the well-known figures who have become woven into Hogwarts lore, the castle is inhabited by numerous lesser-known ghosts whose stories are rarely told in full. These spirits contribute quietly to the sense that the castle is always inhabited, even in moments of apparent stillness. These spirits do not preside over houses, intervene in major events, or command attention from students. Instead, they drift quietly through stairwells, classrooms, and corridors, forming a background presence that reinforces the sense that Hogwarts is not merely old, but continuously lived in by the past. Many of these ghosts remain unnamed in official records. They appear briefly at feasts, pass silently through walls, or linger near locations that once held personal significance. Their anonymity is not accidental. Over centuries, the castle has accumulated more spirits than stories, and not all lives leave behind clear narratives. Some ghosts retain only fragments of identity, known by habit or location, rather than by name. One such figure is the ghost of a former Ravenclaw prefect, glimpsed occasionally near the library stacks. He does not speak unless addressed, and when he does, his responses are precise and restrained. His presence suggests a life structured by order and responsibility, one that carried forward even after death. Yet beyond these hints, little is known. His anonymity underscores how many individuals passed through Hogwarts whose contributions were quiet rather than celebrated. Another often noted apparition is a woman in Elizabethan dress who frequents the corridors near the Charms classrooms. Students report that she hums softly as she moves, repeating the same melody without variation. The repetition suggests emotional fixation, perhaps tied to a memory that never resolved. Like many lesser-known ghosts, her behaviour offers clues without context, inviting interpretation without confirmation. These minor ghosts reveal an important aspect of ghosthood, often overshadowed by more dramatic figures. Not all ghosts are defined by singular tragedy or violent death. Some remain because of habits so deeply ingrained that even death did not break them. They continue routines, walk familiar paths, and return to spaces that once structured their days. Hogwarts classrooms in particular appear to attract such ghosts. Former teachers and students alike are known to linger near rooms where they once spent significant portions of their lives. These spirits rarely interact with the living. Instead, they observe, their presence blending into the atmosphere of learning. The implication is subtle but powerful. Education, when tied closely to identity, can anchor a witch or wizard as firmly as fear or regret. The Great Hall also hosts its share of unnamed spirits. During feasts, ghosts drift above the tables, passing through candles and banners. Some appear engaged, watching students with interest. Others seem distant, their expressions fixed and unreadable. The hall's role as a communal space makes it a natural gathering point for spirits drawn to shared experience. Even the grounds of Hogwarts are not free of spectral presence. Near the lake and along the edges of the Forbidden Forest, faint figures have been reported at dusk. These apparitions are transient, appearing and vanishing without pattern. Their attachment may be less to the institution itself and more to moments of solitude experienced on its outskirts. The presence of so many unnamed ghosts complicates the idea that ghosthood is reserved for the remarkable or infamous. It suggests instead that Hogwarts has accumulated generations of unresolved lives, many of them ordinary. These ghosts did not seek recognition, and in death they remain largely unseen. For students, these background spirits contribute to the castle's atmosphere without demanding engagement. They are sensed rather than studied, reinforcing the idea that Hogwarts exists on multiple temporal layers simultaneously. The living move through spaces shaped by those who came before, often without realizing how many presences remain. This coexistence has subtle effects. Students grow accustomed to passing through ghosts without comment. Walls are shared with figures from other eras. The boundary between past and present becomes porous, accepted rather than questioned. Hogwarts teaches coexistence not only among houses and bloodlines, but across centuries. The anonymity of these ghosts also raises questions about memory and legacy. Not every life is recorded in textbooks or honoured with portraits. Some are remembered only through presence. These ghosts endure without narrative, reminding observers that history is broader than what survives in writing. Hogwarts, by accommodating these lesser-known spirits, reinforces its role as a keeper of memory rather than a curator of glory. The castle does not discriminate between famous and forgotten. It holds them all. In this way, the unnamed ghosts of Hogwarts serve a quiet but essential function. They transform the castle from a historical monument into a living archive. Their silence speaks to the countless lives shaped within these walls, lives that did not end cleanly enough to disappear entirely. They drift without ceremony, observe without judgment, and remain without explanation. And in doing so, they remind anyone who walks the corridors that Hogwarts is never inhabited by the present alone. The question of why some witches and wizards remain as ghosts, while others pass on, is one that has occupied magical scholars for centuries. Debate persists, not because evidence is lacking, but because the phenomenon resists rigid classification, it is tempting to search for a single rule or universal explanation, but ghosthood resists simplicity. No spell forces a spirit to remain, and no authority compels a witch or wizard to move on. The choice when it occurs is intensely personal, shaped by emotion, identity, and circumstance, rather than doctrine or destiny. What is consistent across recorded cases is that becoming a ghost is never the result of fulfillment. Those who pass on do so not because they lack attachment to life, but because they are able to accept its end. Ghosts remain because they cannot. This inability does not stem from weakness alone. It often arises from powerful emotional bonds formed during life, bonds that death arrives too suddenly or unjustly to resolve. Fear of the unknown is among the most commonly cited motivations. Magical understanding acknowledges that something follows death, but offers little certainty about its nature. For some, that uncertainty is intolerable. The familiar world, even in diminished form, feels safer than an undefined beyond. Nearly Headless Nick's admission reflects this plainly. He did not remain because he hoped for something better, but because he could not face what he did not understand. Attachment to identity is another powerful anchor. For witches and wizards whose sense of self is deeply tied to a role, a place, or a reputation, death threatens erasure. Becoming a ghost allows that identity to persist, even if imperfectly. Titles, habits, and affiliations are carried forward, frozen at the moment of death. This preservation offers comfort, but at the cost of growth. Regret also plays a central role. Unfinished business is often spoken of casually, but in magical terms, it represents unresolved emotional weight. Helena Ravenclaw's silence, the Bloody Baron's chains, and Myrtle Warren's relentless grief all stem from moments that could not be undone or properly addressed. Ghosthood becomes a way of remaining close to the point of rupture, even if resolution is no longer possible. Importantly, wizarding culture does not frame the choice to remain as virtuous. Unlike legends that celebrate spirits who linger to protect or guide, Hogwarts ghosts themselves caution against romanticizing their existence. They speak of limitation, not transcendence. They observe life rather than live it. This honesty suggests that passing on is not abandonment, but completion. The absence of certain figures at Hogwarts reinforces this understanding. Many witches and wizards who died within the castle did not become ghosts. Their lack of spectral presence is not evidence of insignificance, but of acceptance. They left without imprint, taking their stories with them beyond the reach of the living world. This contrast underscores a difficult truth. Ghosthood is not evidence of depth or importance, it is evidence of resistance. The ghosts who remain are not more meaningful than those who passed on. They are simply unable to let go. Hogwarts itself does not compel ghosts to stay. It accommodates them, but it does not bind them. Ghosts could, in theory, leave the grounds, yet most choose not to. Their attachment is not enforced by magic, but by memory. The castle becomes a gravitational centre for unresolved identity. For students, this reality carries an implicit lesson. Ambition, loyalty, and attachment are not inherently dangerous, but when they eclipse acceptance, they can tether an individual beyond death. The ghosts of Hogwarts stand as living, or rather, lingering examples of what happens when life ends without closure. Ultimately, the choice to remain as a ghost reflects not a failure of courage, but a moment of human hesitation magnified by magic. It is the instinct to hold on when letting go feels impossible. And in that instinct, the Ghosts of Hogwarts reveal something profoundly relatable. Even in a world shaped by spells and enchantments, the most powerful forces remain emotional. They linger not because they must, but because they cannot yet release what they were. When the living pass through Hogwarts, they leave behind more than footprints and fading echoes of laughter. They leave patterns of behaviour, emotional imprints, and subtle changes that accumulate quietly over time. They leave habits, traditions, expectations, and small moments that rarely make it into official histories. Over centuries, these fragments accumulate, and it is the Ghosts of Hogwarts who bear witness to them most consistently. While portraits preserve curated memory and archives preserve selected facts, ghosts preserve continuity. They remember what the castle felt like when names now spoken reverently were still uncertain students finding their way. Ghosts occupy a unique position within Hogwarts' ecosystem of memory. They are not bound to classrooms or roles in the way staff members are, nor do they graduate and depart like students. They remain. In doing so, they become quiet custodians of institutional memory, observing changes that unfold slowly enough to escape the notice of any single living generation. Through the eyes of ghosts, Hogwarts is not divided neatly into eras. Change is incremental. Teaching methods evolve, fashions shift, and rules are revised, but the underlying rhythm of the school persists. Ghosts watch the repetition of arrivals and departures, of first-year nerves and final-year confidence played out again and again. This repetition anchors them, reinforcing the sense that the present is always layered atop the past. The Great Hall offers a particularly vivid example of this continuity. Ghosts drift above tables as students feast below, watching the same rituals repeated under different banners and faces. They have seen celebrations during times of peace and austerity, during times of war. They remember feasts interrupted by announcements of loss, and feasts held in defiance of fear. These memories are not archived, but lived. In classrooms, ghosts observe the evolution of knowledge itself. Spells once considered advanced become introductory lessons. Practices once common fall out of favour. Through it all, ghosts remain witnesses to the way understanding grows and contracts over time. This long view tempers the urgency of the present, placing individual achievements within a broader continuum. The presence of ghosts also preserves emotional memory. They remember the tones of voices that once filled corridors, the arguments that seemed world-ending at the time, the friendships that defined entire school years and then dissolved. For ghosts, these moments do not vanish simply because the people involved moved on. They remain part of the atmosphere, recalled whenever similar scenes unfold. Hogwarts ghosts also serve as informal bridges between generations. Though they rarely offer direct instruction, their presence connects students to a lineage far older than any textbook. A student passing through a wall alongside a ghost inadvertently crosses centuries of shared space. The experience normalizes continuity rather than novelty, reinforcing the idea that belonging at Hogwarts extends beyond any single cohort. Importantly, ghosts do not preserve memory selectively. They remember failures alongside triumphs. They have watched students expelled, teachers dismissed, and policies reversed. They have seen ideals tested and compromised. This unfiltered memory prevents the past from becoming purely celebratory. It introduces nuance where legend might otherwise dominate. At times, this persistence creates friction. Ghosts remember versions of Hogwarts that no longer exist. and their expectations occasionally clash with modern sensibilities. Yet even this tension serves a purpose. It highlights the reality that institutions are not static. They evolve through negotiation between what was and what is. For the ghosts themselves, this role is both purpose and burden. Bearing witness offers a sense of relevance, a way to remain connected to a living community. Yet it also reinforces their separation. They watch students grow and change in ways they no longer can. The continuity they preserve excludes them from participating in it. In this way, ghosts embody the paradox of memory. To remember everything is to remain anchored, but also to remain apart. Hogwarts ghosts preserve the school's emotional spine, but they do so at the cost of their own progression. As long as Hogwarts endures, its ghost will continue to drift through its halls, carrying with them the accumulated weight of what once was. They ensure that the castle is never merely a collection of stones and spells, but a place shaped by generations of lived experience. Through them, Hogwarts remembers itself. For students living within the walls of Hogwarts, ghosts are not distant historical curiosities. They are integrated into the practical experience of moving through the castle, shaping how space itself is perceived. They are part of the daily rhythm of the school, encountered as routinely as moving staircases or enchanted ceilings. From the first days of term to the final walk out of the castle, students learn to coexist with the dead in ways that feel ordinary, even mundane. This normalization shapes how young witches and wizards understand both Hogwarts and the broader magical world. Ghosts appear most visibly during communal moments. At feasts, they drift above the tables, passing through floating candles and banners, while students eat below. Their presence is rarely remarked upon, not because it is insignificant, but because it is expected. For first-year students, this may be unsettling at first. Over time, it becomes simply another feature of life at Hogwarts, reinforcing the idea that magic dissolves boundaries that would otherwise seem absolute. In corridors and stairwells, ghosts pass students without comment. Some offer polite greetings, others glide by in silence. Students learn quickly which ghosts welcome interaction and which prefer solitude. This unspoken etiquette becomes part of Hogwarts' social education, teaching awareness, respect, and restraint. Ghosts also intersect with student life through tradition and ritual. House ghosts reinforce identity, appearing at common room gatherings and celebrations. Their presence connects current students to generations who came before, lending weight to house pride that extends beyond any single cohort. In classrooms, ghosts serve as reminders of continuity. Former students and teachers drift near lessons similar to those they once attended or taught. Though they rarely intervene, their presence subtly reinforces the idea that learning at Hogwarts is part of a lineage rather than a discrete experience. Ghosts are also woven into student mischief. Passing through walls offers opportunities for pranks and shortcuts. Knowledge of ghostly habits becomes informal lore passed between students. These interactions, playful rather than reverent, further normalise coexistence. At times, ghosts become sources of comfort. Students struggling with loneliness or confusion may find unexpected solace in a familiar spectral presence. The ghost's limitations do not prevent empathy. Having endured loss and regret themselves, many respond with patience rather than judgment. Yet ghosts also remind students of boundaries. Their inability to fully participate underscores the cost of remaining behind. This implicit lesson tempers fascination with realism, presenting ghosthood as presence without fulfillment. Through daily exposure, Hogwarts students learn that death is neither hidden nor dramatised. It is acknowledged, accommodated, and integrated into communal life. Ghosts make mortality visible without making it terrifying. By the time students leave Hogwarts, their understanding of the world includes an acceptance of coexistence across time. They carry with them the quiet lesson that institutions endure not through erasing the past, but by living alongside it. When all is said and done, the ghosts of Hogwarts are not simply remnants of the past lingering out of habit. They are ongoing reminders that endings, particularly emotional ones, rarely align neatly with the passage of time. They're expressions of something more enduring, the human difficulty of letting go. Each ghost carries a different reason for remaining, shaped by fear, regret, devotion, or unresolved need. Taken together, they form a quiet chorus that echoes through the castle, reminding the living that endings are rarely as clean as stories suggest. Hogwarts does not treat its ghosts as spectacles or warnings. It allows them to exist, to drift through its halls, to occupy space without demanding resolution. In doing so, the school acknowledges a truth that extends beyond magic. Growth does not come from erasing the past, but from living alongside it with awareness and restraint. The ghosts do not ask to be admired, and they do not seek to frighten. They remain because something within them was never completed. Their presence is a consequence, not a choice renewed daily. Each year, as new students arrive, the ghosts observe quietly, watching fresh lives unfold in spaces that once held their own hopes and failures. In this way, Hogwarts becomes more than a school. It becomes a place where time overlaps, where lessons are learned not only through instruction, but through presence. The living learn courage, ambition, patience, and curiosity. The ghosts bear witness, reminding everyone that identity, once shaped, can endure longer than expected. Perhaps that is why the castle feels so alive, not because it is untouched by loss, but because loss is acknowledged rather than hidden. The ghosts of Hogwarts ensure that the past is never reduced to legend alone. It remains personal, imperfect, and close at hand. As students move on and lives continue elsewhere, the ghosts remain, watching the familiar rhythms repeat. New faces replace old ones, traditions persist, the castle endures, and within it, the quiet figures of those who could not move on continue to drift, neither fully present nor fully gone. If you've enjoyed this journey through the ghosts of Hogwarts and the stories they carry, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps keep these long-form explorations of Wizarding World lore alive and allows us to continue uncovering the quieter histories hidden within familiar places. Until next time, thank you for listening. And remember, at Hogwarts, the past is never truly gone. It is simply waiting in the next corridor, just out of sight. Throughout Hogwarts' long history, small, often overlooked details further deepen the presence of its ghosts and the atmosphere they create. These details rarely alter events, but they enrich the lived texture of the castle in ways that become noticeable only over time. Ghosts, for example, are affected by weather in subtle ways. On cold nights they appear slightly more opaque, their outlines sharper against the stone. During storms their movements slow, as if the pressure in the air weighs differently on magic than on flesh. These changes are not dramatic enough to be remarked upon in lessons, but students who spend years at Hogwarts notice them instinctively, learning to read the castle's moods through its inhabitants, living and dead alike. Sound behaves differently around ghosts as well. Footsteps echo strangely when a ghost has recently passed through a corridor, and whispers sometimes linger longer than expected, as if caught in the wake of an unseen presence. These effects are not dangerous, but they contribute to the sense that Hogwarts remembers more than it reveals. The interaction between ghosts and enchanted objects adds another layer. Portraits often acknowledge ghosts with familiarity, engaging them in quiet conversation when no students are present. Suits of armour react faintly as ghosts pass, shifting or rattling despite lacking any visible cause. These interactions suggest that Hogwarts enchantments recognise ghosts not as intrusions, but as part of the castle's internal order. Ghosts themselves display small habits that persist across centuries. Nearly headless Nick adjusts his ruff, even though it never sits quite correctly. The fat friar pauses instinctively near doorways, as though holding them open for others. The bloody Baron avoids narrow passages, his chains brushing stone in a way that seems deliberately restrained. These habits are remnants of life that death did not erase. Students too develop ghost-related customs over time. Some avoid certain corridors late at night, out of respect rather than fear. Others greet familiar ghosts instinctively, even when distracted. These behaviours are rarely taught. They're absorbed through observation, becoming part of Hogwarts' unspoken culture. Seasonal changes also influence ghostly presence. During winter holidays, when the castle empties, ghosts drift more freely through unused spaces, lingering in classrooms and common rooms left silent. In contrast, the start of term draws them back into corridors filled with energy, as though drawn by the return of life. These details do not alter the ghost stories, but they enrich them. They remind us that ghosthood is not static spectacle, but an ongoing state shaped by environment, habit, and memory. Hogwarts ghosts are not frozen images of the past. They are participants in the castle's daily rhythm, bound to it as surely as the stones themselves. By attending to these quieter details, the castle becomes fuller, more layered, and more believable as a place where centuries overlap. Hogwarts is not haunted only by tragedy or legend. It is haunted by routine, by habit, and by lives that ended without fully releasing their hold on the world. These small presences, noticed only when one slows down long enough to observe them, are what ultimately give Hogwarts its enduring sense of depth. They ensure that even in moments of stillness, the castle is never truly empty.